Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. The attic was a dusty time capsule filled with the accumulated memories of a lifetime. Graham stood at the entrance, his eyes sweeping over the cluttered space. 49 boxes, each labeled meticulously in his mother's neat handwriting, waited to be sorted through. The task ahead felt monumental, but it was necessary. His mother's house needed to be sold, and this was the final step in closing this chapter of their lives. Sunlight filtered through a small, grimy window, casting long shadows across the wooden floorboards. Graham took a deep breath, inhaling the musty scent of old paper and forgotten treasures. He ran a hand through his graying hair, steeling himself for the emotional journey ahead. As he approached the first box, labeled 1970 to 1975, Graham couldn't help but reflect on the current state of his own life. His marriage was in shambles, a separation looming on the horizon. The weight of that knowledge pressed down on him, making each step feel heavier than the last. He carefully opened the box, revealing a collection of childhood mementos. Old report cards, crayon drawings, and faded photographs spilled out onto the floor. Graham picked up a small, leather-bound album and began flipping through the pages. "Look at that," he murmured to himself, a wistful smile tugging at his lips. There he was, gap-toothed and grinning, standing proudly next to his first bicycle. His mother's beaming face shone beside him, her arms wrapped protectively around his small frame. As he continued to sort through the box, Graham's mind wandered to his time in the army. The discipline, the camaraderie, the sense of purpose. All of it felt like a lifetime ago. He came across an old dog tag, its metal surface dulled with age. Running his thumb over the embossed letters, he remembered the young man he once was, full of determination and dreams. Hours passed as Graham methodically worked his way through the boxes. Each one held a different era of his life, carefully preserved by his mother's loving hands. He found himself lost in memories, both joyful and painful, as he unearthed forgotten artifacts of his past. It was late in the afternoon when Graham came across a box labeled School Days. Inside, he found a collection of old notebooks, report cards, and art projects. As he rifled through the papers, a particular drawing caught his eye. The crayon illustration was crude but unmistakable. It depicted 3 figures: a tall man with a mustache, a woman with curly hair, and a small child between them. Graham recognized it immediately as a family portrait, himself with his parents. But something about the drawing made him pause. The child in the picture was wearing a dress. Graham's breath caught in his throat as he stared at the image. He remembered drawing this picture, remembered the pride he felt as he presented it to his teacher. But he had forgotten, or perhaps suppressed, the fact that he had drawn himself as a girl. Memories began to surface, long-buried feelings of confusion and discomfort. Graham recalled moments from his childhood when he had felt out of place in his own skin, times when he had longed to wear pretty dresses like the other girls in his class. He sat back on his heels, the drawing clutched in his trembling hands. This simple crayon sketch had unearthed a part of himself he had buried deep, hidden away beneath layers of societal expectations and personal denial. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the attic, Graham found himself lost in thought. He reflected on his life, the choices he had made, and the person he had become. The drawing in his hands seemed to represent a fork in the road, a path not taken. With a heavy sigh, Graham carefully placed the drawing back in the box. He still had many more memories to sort through, many more pieces of his past to confront. But for now, he needed a moment to process this unexpected revelation. He stood up, stretching his stiff muscles, and made his way to the attic window. As he looked out over the neighborhood, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun, Graham felt a strange mix of emotions washing over him. Nostalgia, regret, curiosity, and a glimmer of something he couldn't quite name. Perhaps hope. The task of clearing out his mother's loft suddenly felt like more than just a chore. It had become a journey of self-discovery, forcing Graham to confront aspects of himself he had long ignored. As he turned back to the remaining boxes, he realized that this process of sorting through the past might just help him figure out his future. With renewed determination, Graham returned to his task. He opened the next box labeled Family Holidays and began to sift through its contents. Postcards from exotic locations, seashells collected from distant beaches, and faded photographs of smiling faces greeted him. One particular photo caught his attention. It showed a family of 3 on a beach: Graham, his ex-wife Caroline, and their daughter Emma. They looked so happy, so carefree. Graham's heart ached as he remembered the day it was taken, just a few years before everything fell apart. He thought about Emma, now a young adult pursuing her dreams on the other side of the country. Their relationship had become strained in recent years, partly due to the tension between Graham and Caroline. He made a mental note to call Emma soon to try and bridge the gap that had grown between them. As Graham continued to sort through the holiday memorabilia, he came across a small, ornate box he didn't recognize. Curious, he opened it to find a collection of letters tied together with a faded ribbon. The handwriting on the envelopes was unfamiliar, and Graham realized these must be love letters from his father to his mother, written long before he was born. With a mixture of curiosity and hesitation, Graham untied the ribbon and began to read. The letters were full of passion, hope, and dreams for the future. His father's words painted a picture of a young couple deeply in love, facing the world together with optimism and determination. Graham felt a pang of guilt as he thought about his own failing marriage. Had he and Caroline lost that spark, that sense of adventure and partnership? When had they stopped seeing each other as allies and started viewing each other as adversaries? As he read through the letters, Graham began to see his parents in a new light. They weren't just mom and dad, but 2 individuals who had chosen to build a life together, who had faced challenges and overcome them side by side. It made him wonder about the conversations they must have had, the dreams they shared, and the compromises they made along the way. One letter in particular caught Graham's attention. In it, his father wrote about his fears of becoming a parent, of not being good enough or knowing how to raise a child. The vulnerability in those words struck a chord with Graham. He remembered his own fears when Emma was born, the overwhelming sense of responsibility and the worry that he might somehow fail her. Graham set the letters aside, his mind swirling with thoughts and emotions. He glanced at his watch, surprised to see how much time had passed. The attic was growing dark, the last rays of sunlight fading away. He stood up, stretching his stiff muscles, and decided to call it a day. As he made his way down the attic stairs, Graham's phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a text from Caroline asking about some paperwork related to their separation. The message felt cold, businesslike, a far cry from the loving letters he had just read. Graham sighed, feeling the weight of his failing marriage pressing down on him once again. But as he looked back at the boxes still waiting to be sorted, he felt a glimmer of something else. Hope, perhaps, or at least a sense of perspective. His parents had built a life together, overcoming their fears and doubts. Maybe there were lessons there, hidden among the mementos and memories that could help him navigate his own struggles. He texted Caroline back, suggesting they meet for coffee to discuss things in person. It was a small step, but it felt like a move in the right direction. As he left his mother's house, locking the door behind him, Graham felt a mix of exhaustion and anticipation. There were still many boxes to go through, many memories to confront. But for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was on the verge of understanding something important about himself and his life. The next morning, Graham returned to the attic with renewed determination. He had spent a restless night thinking about the drawing he had found, the one where he had depicted himself as a girl. The memory of those feelings, the confusion, the longing, the sense of being different, had resurfaced with surprising clarity. As he opened the next box labeled School Projects, Graham found himself actively looking for more signs of his childhood struggle with gender identity. He came across old essays, art projects, and even a journal from his early teens. Flipping through the pages, he found entries that hinted at his inner turmoil. One particular entry caught his eye. "Sometimes I feel like I'm wearing a costume, like the real me is hiding underneath, waiting to come out. But I don't know how to take off this costume. I don't know if I'm allowed to." Graham's hands trembled as he read the words he had written so many years ago. He remembered the confusion, the fear of being different, the desperate desire to fit in. How had he forgotten all of this? How had he buried these feelings so deeply? As he continued to sort through the boxes, Graham found more evidence of his struggle. There were drawings of himself in dresses hidden away in the back of sketchbooks. He found a small makeup palette, carefully wrapped in tissue paper and tucked into the corner of a box. The memory of sneaking into his mother's room to try on her lipstick came rushing back. Graham sat back, overwhelmed by the flood of memories and emotions. He had spent so many years pushing these feelings aside, focusing on being the person he thought he was supposed to be. He had joined the army, gotten married, had a child, all the things society expected of him. But had he ever truly been happy? As the day wore on, Graham found himself lost in thought, barely noticing the passage of time. He mechanically sorted through box after box, his mind racing with questions and possibilities. What if he had acknowledged these feelings earlier? What if he had allowed himself to explore this part of his identity? It was late afternoon when Graham's phone rang, startling him out of his reverie. It was Caroline, calling to confirm their coffee meeting the next day. Graham hesitated for a moment before answering, suddenly unsure of how to interact with her in light of his recent discoveries. "Hello, Caroline," he said, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. "Graham," she replied, her tone businesslike. "I just wanted to make sure we're still on for tomorrow. There's a lot we need to discuss about the separation." Graham took a deep breath. "Yes, we're still on. But, Caroline, I think we need to talk about more than just the paperwork." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What do you mean?" Caroline asked, a note of wariness in her voice. "I've been going through my mother's things," Graham explained, "and I've discovered some things about myself. Things I think you should know." Another pause, longer this time. "Graham, what's going on?" Caroline's voice had softened slightly, concern replacing the previous coolness. "It's complicated," Graham said, running a hand through his hair. "I'd rather talk about it in person, but I think it might help explain some things. About me, about our marriage." "All right," Caroline said slowly. "I'll see you tomorrow then. Take care, Graham." As he hung up the phone, Graham felt a mix of relief and anxiety. He had taken the first step towards sharing his discovery, but the thought of actually explaining it to Caroline was terrifying. How would she react? Would she understand? Would this change how she saw their entire relationship? Graham turned back to the boxes, determined to finish his task before the meeting with Caroline. As he worked, he found himself imagining different scenarios, practicing what he might say to her. But with each passing hour, he realized that there was no easy way to explain what he was going through. This wasn't just about their marriage or their separation. It was about his entire identity, his understanding of himself. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the attic, Graham came across one final box. It was smaller than the others, unmarked and tucked away in a corner. Curious, he opened it to find a collection of letters addressed to him, all in his mother's handwriting. With trembling hands, Graham opened the first letter. It was dated just a few months before his mother's passing. "My dearest Graham, there's so much I've wanted to tell you over the years, so many conversations we should have had. But I was afraid of saying the wrong thing, afraid of pushing you away. Now, as I face the end of my life, I realize that my fear has kept me from being the mother you truly needed. I saw you struggling when you were young.
I noticed the way you looked at dresses, the way you played with dolls when you thought no one was watching. I found your drawings, your secret stash of makeup. I knew you were grappling with something big, something that scared you. I should have talked to you about it. I should have told you that it was okay to question, to explore, to be different. Instead, I stayed silent, hoping it was just a phase, afraid of what others might say or think. I'm sorry, my dear child. I'm sorry I didn't give you the support and understanding you needed. I hope that someday you'll find the courage to be true to yourself, to explore the parts of you that you've kept hidden for so long. Know that I love you, unconditionally and completely, no matter who you are or who you choose to be. With all my love, Mom. Graham's vision blurred with tears as he read the letter. He had never known that his mother had seen his struggles, that she had understood on some level what he was going through. The thought that she had carried this knowledge, this regret to her grave, was almost too much to bear. As he read through the rest of the letters, each one addressing a different aspect of his life and identity, Graham felt a profound sense of loss and longing. He wished he could talk to his mother now, to have the conversations they should have had years ago, but mixed with the grief was a sense of validation. His mother had seen him, truly seen him, even when he was trying so hard to hide. And she had loved him unconditionally. As night fell, Graham carefully packed away the letters, his mind made up. Tomorrow, when he met with Caroline, he would tell her everything. It wouldn't be easy, and he didn't know where it would lead, but he knew he couldn't keep hiding from himself any longer. With a deep breath, Graham looked around the attic. There were still boxes to sort, still memories to confront, but for the first time in years, he felt a sense of hope. Whatever came next, he would face it as his true self. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the turmoil in Graham's mind. He had barely slept, his thoughts racing with memories, questions, and anxiety about the upcoming conversation with Caroline. As he dressed for their meeting, he found himself staring at his reflection in the mirror, seeing himself with new eyes. The man looking back at him was familiar, graying hair, lines around the eyes, the strong jaw that had always been a point of pride. But now Graham could see beyond the surface, could recognize the person hiding underneath the carefully constructed facade. With trembling hands, he reached for a small makeup bag he had purchased on impulse the night before. He had never worn makeup in public before, always too afraid of judgment and ridicule. But today, he decided, would be different. With careful, unpracticed strokes, he applied a light layer of foundation, a touch of blush, a hint of eyeshadow. It wasn't much, barely noticeable really, but it felt like a significant step. As he left the house, Graham felt a mix of terror and exhilaration. He was stepping into the unknown, risking everything he had built over the years. But for the first time in a long time, he also felt truly alive. The coffee shop where he was meeting Caroline was bustling with morning customers. Graham arrived early, choosing a quiet table in the corner. As he waited, he couldn't help but wonder if anyone could tell that something was different about him today. Did they see the makeup? Could they sense the internal transformation he was undergoing? Caroline arrived right on time, her face a mask of professional detachment. But as she approached the table, her expression changed to one of confusion and concern. "Graham," she said, sliding into the seat across from him, "are you wearing makeup?" Graham took a deep breath. This was it, the moment of truth. "Yes," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "Caroline, there's something I need to tell you, something I've only recently come to understand about myself." Over the next hour, Graham poured out his heart. He told Caroline about the drawings he had found, about the journal entries and the hidden makeup. He shared the letter from his mother and the feelings he had suppressed for so long. As he spoke, he could see a range of emotions flashing across Caroline's face: surprise, confusion, hurt, and eventually, a glimmer of understanding. When he finally fell silent, Caroline reached across the table and took his hand. "Oh, Graham,
she said softly. "I had no idea you were carrying all of this." "I didn't either," Graham admitted. "Not consciously, at least. I've spent so many years trying to be the person I thought I was supposed to be. The soldier, the husband, the father. I never allowed myself to question, to explore." Caroline was quiet for a moment, processing everything she had heard. "What does this mean for you now?" she asked finally. "For us?" Graham shook his head. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I'm still trying to figure that out, but I do know that I can't keep living a lie. I need to explore this part of myself to understand who I really am." To his surprise, Caroline squeezed his hand. "I think I understand," she said. "Our marriage may be over, Graham, but I still care about you. I want you to be happy, to be true to yourself." Tears welled up in Graham's eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. "I know this must be a shock." "It is," Caroline admitted. "But in a way, it also explains a lot. The distance between us, the feeling that you were always holding something back. I think deep down, I always sensed that there was more to you than you were showing." As they continued to talk, the conversation shifted from their past to their future. They discussed practical matters, how to explain this to Emma, how it might affect their divorce proceedings. But underlying it all was a new sense of honesty and understanding. When they finally parted ways, Graham felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, filled with difficult conversations and personal exploration. But for the first time in years, he felt like he was moving in the right direction. As he walked home, Graham's phone buzzed with a text from Caroline. "I'm proud of you for being honest with yourself and with me. Whatever happens next, know that you have my support." Graham smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude for his soon-to-be ex-wife's understanding. He had been so afraid of this conversation, but it had turned out to be the first step towards a new chapter in his life. Back at his mother's house, Graham returned to the attic. There were still boxes to sort through, still memories to confront. But now he approached the task with a new perspective. Each item he uncovered wasn't just a relic of the past, but a piece of the puzzle that made up his true self. As he worked, Graham began to make two piles. One was for the things he would keep, mementos of his life, both the parts he had embraced and those he had hidden. The other was for things he would let go, the trappings of the identity he had constructed, the mask he had worn for so long. In one box, he found an old army uniform. He ran his hands over the rough fabric, remembering the pride he had felt wearing it, but also the discomfort, the sense that he was playing a role that didn't quite fit. With a deep breath, he placed it in the pile of things to let go. In another box, he discovered a photo album from his wedding day. He flipped through it, studying the pictures with new eyes. There he was, standing tall in his tuxedo, Caroline radiant in her white dress. They both looked happy, hopeful. Graham felt a pang of sadness, but not regret. That day had been real. Those feelings had been true. But people change, grow, discover new truths about themselves. He placed the album in the keep pile, a reminder of the important chapter in his life, even if it wasn't the whole story. As the day wore on, Graham found himself taking more breaks, using the time to research and reflect. He read articles about gender identity, joined online forums where people shared their experiences of coming out later in life. Each story he read, each testimony he heard, helped him feel less alone, more understood. It was during one of these breaks that Graham received a call from Emma. His heart raced as he answered, wondering if Caroline had already spoken to their daughter. "Hey, Dad," Emma's voice came through the speaker, sounding hesitant. "Mom said you had something important to talk to me about. Is everything okay?" Graham took a deep breath. "Hi, sweetheart. Yes, there is something I need to tell you. It's not easy to explain over the phone. Do you think you could come visit soon?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Dad, you're scaring me a little. Are you sick?" No, nothing like that," Graham assured her quickly. "I'm healthy. It's just,
I've discovered some things about myself, about who I am. Things that might be surprising, that might change how you see me, but I want you to hear it from me, in person. Another pause, longer this time. Okay, Emma said finally. I can come this weekend. Is that soon enough? That would be perfect, Graham said, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. Thank you, Emma. I love you. You know that, right? I love you too, Dad, Emma replied, her voice softening. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together, okay? As he hung up the phone, Graham felt a surge of love for his daughter. He knew the conversation ahead would be difficult, but Emma's words gave him hope. Whatever happened, they would face it as a family. With renewed energy, Graham returned to his task. As he sorted through the remaining boxes, he found himself imagining the future. What would it be like to live authentically, to explore the parts of himself he had kept hidden for so long? The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. In one of the last boxes, Graham found something that made his heart skip a beat. It was a dress, carefully folded and wrapped in tissue paper. He recognized it immediately. It had belonged to his mother, a beautiful blue sundress she had often worn in the summer. With trembling hands, Graham lifted the dress out of the box. He held it up against himself, looking at his reflection in the attic's dusty mirror. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine wearing it, feeling the soft fabric against his skin, twirling in the sunlight. It was a powerful moment, a glimpse of a possible future. Graham carefully folded the dress and placed it in the keep pile. He wasn't sure if he'd ever have the courage to wear it in public, but having it felt like a promise to himself, a tangible reminder of the journey he was embarking on. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the attic, Graham realized he had finished his task. The boxes were sorted, the memories confronted. He looked around the now organized space, feeling a sense of accomplishment and closure. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.